Hey guys, Mike here. So in today's video, I'm going to go into great detail on why and how our government is going to be taking over 50% of our money. And I know it sounds ludicrous and crazy, but I think when I kind of take you through it, you'll kind of get what I'm talking about. And a lot of people don't talk about this because truth is, it's not very popular. A lot of people don't like to learn about this stuff. They just want to be told what stock to buy, what crypto to buy, when to sell it, all that good stuff. But to me, it's critical to understand what is surrounding these types of markets, okay? And so if you don't understand that, I don't know, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees or something like that. So this is critical. If I had a teenager, I'd actually make them watch this video, I would. My son's too young right now, but they need to understand what their generation is up against, okay? Because their generation is in way worse shape than my generation, okay? And so I think once I take you through it, you'll understand what I'm talking about and kind of see it. A lot of people, they'll be furious in the comments and oh my God, blah, blah, blah. But anybody that's watched this channel long enough knows I don't make fear-mongering videos. I just try to put it out there. Once I learn stuff, I try to put it out there to you, those who want to know about it. Same way I did dark pools yesterday. You see that I don't get a lot of views, right? Nobody wants to hear that kind of stuff, okay? A lot of people just don't want to understand this kind of stuff. But it will help you in the long run, okay? On a side note, you see what's going on with cryptocurrency right now this weekend? I mean, it's been in the toilet and massive drops, all that stuff. And so, you know, when's the best time to buy sometimes? On these dips. Don't forget to hit that affiliate link down in the bottom of the description there, where you can earn up to $250 of free Bitcoin just for opening an account with BlockFi, depending on your initial deposit, and more importantly, draw interest on all your cryptocurrencies and get a payment each month for that, which is what I love to do, and apply for their ever popular credit card. I believe I am still number 200,000 on the waiting list right now. And you also take loans out on your cryptocurrencies at a very reasonable rate as well. And as usual, we appreciate your support of the channel. And having said all that, let's go ahead and get into the details of all this. So of course, you might not know this, but the White House came out with a $6 trillion budget, okay, to be spent on a whole bunch of stuff. But the key line to take away from this is it makes physical sense to invest now when the cost of borrowing is cheap and reduce deficits later. And the last part of that line about reducing deficits later is the problem. They always say that we're going to reduce deficits later, and they keep pushing it on to the next generation. That's basically what they keep trying to do, right? And so you can see right here, as you can see, starting in 2015, the deficit just keeps increasing every year. And then look at 2020, for God's sakes. Holy. And then going on to total debt versus GDP. Look what happened when the deficit started increasing. Look what happened. The debt basically eclipsed the GDP, and now it's just $28 trillion in debt versus around 20 trillion in GDP. That is not good, by the way, when that happens, if you're wondering. Then, of course, we got the old inflation happening right here. You see the massive spike up, and then look at the other years. We're going all the way back to 2011, for crying out loud. Look at that. That is amazing. And this report coming up is supposed to be even worse, coming out in June, talking about May. And then, of course, going on to the federal balance sheet. I mean, this is one reason this is happening. These guys have blown their balance sheet up, bought everything that moved to over 8 trillion. Supposed to hit around 9 to 10 trillion in 2021 because they're still buying 100 to 120 billion dollars a month in treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. And then my favorite is the debt clock. If you've never seen this, you got to download on your phone or something. Here we are at $28 trillion and counting. As you can see how fast this thing is going up. You can look at right here, U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio. In 2000, it was 57%. Now it's 127%. I mean, that is insane. And then look down here at the interest, for crying out loud. Like you can see our three big expenses right there. Medicare, Social Security, Defense. Look at the interest, almost $400 billion. And I might be the only one that feels this way, but I think this right here shows how I really feel about how our government operates and how they think about our economy sometimes and how they're making these decisions.
Sirs, another company is going under. Now determining most prudent move, French company. Bailout. The most prudent move is a bailout.
And so that's how I feel about it. You know, I mean, it just makes no sense on some of the moves they are making. And then, of course, you feel like, are they just lying to us? Which I honestly do believe they're definitely, of course, they can't come out and tell the truth because it makes people panic, right? And that's the last thing they want. I mean, our economy is built around the stock market, which is just insane on top of itself. But, what is all this doing? What is inflation? The Fed actually purchasing all this stuff, running up their balance sheet, the debt, all of this doing to the dollar, which makes it even worse. And look at this right here. And this is the US dollar currency index, and you can just see, I mean, this thing has been on just a steady decline. And then I was filming this morning. Look at this fall off a cliff. Look at that. Just fell off a cliff today around 11 a.m. I don't know why, and I really don't have time to even research why, but that's the stuff I'm talking about. This is what all of this is doing to our dollar here, and this is what's dangerous. And what's really important to understand here, and I don't know why it's not getting more attention, but in the next decade or so, there's a really good chance that we're going to lose our reserve currency status. Currently, America has been for years the most valuable currency out there. People invest a lot of money. They buy a lot of our treasuries, things like that. They're the reason foreign investors and stuff, the reason we can keep going like this and living the kind of lifestyle we live and being the world's police and everything else, because everybody else keeps helping us do that by buying our debt, right? Which of course raises, you see all the interest on debt, we owe a lot of debt, right? And so, losing reserve currency status would be a disaster, okay? And if you don't believe me, let's just ask the countries that were before us with the reserve currency status. Portugal in the 1400s, Spain in the 1500s, Netherlands in the 1600s, France, our friends, in the 1700s. Then there was England in the 18 and 1900s, and then in the 1920s, we took over. And it's key to understand there are three major signs that precede the fall of world reserve currencies. And this is very important to know. And tell me if these look really, really familiar. Waging war and massive empire building, and increased reliance on finance from conquered lands, excessive taxation, and a shriveling domestic economy. And of course, look who actually helps fund our debt here. You got China and Japan are basically the top two as far as countries. Then you got Ireland, Brazil, England, Luxembourg, Switzerland. Then you got other hold $3 trillion. And if you don't believe me, just listen to a guy who's been in the market for over 40 years, and this is kind of his field of expertise.
This massive expansion in fiscal policy, and the problem is, if you end up getting inflation, and frankly, even if you don't, the debt is going to be so big. You remember I did my entitlement talks 8 or 9 years ago. That's all happened except for one thing, the interest rate level. So we're right now in the crux of when the baby boomers accelerate in terms of getting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that stuff. Right as we're doing that, we just put $6 trillion of new debt on. Again, all enabled by the Fed. These guys could not be doing it. Bond rates would go to a prohibitive level. This is the CBO. This is not me. Okay, and they're saying if 10 years go to 4.9%, which is their normalized projection, the interest expense alone will be close to 30% of GDP every year. That's basically what we just spent on the COVID emergency in the last year. There is no way we can afford to have 30% of all government outlays be toward interest expense. So what will happen is the Fed will have to monetize that. When they monetize it, I believe it'll have horrible implications for the dollar. And that's why I said in that speech, yes, that I think it's more likely than not within 15 years we lose reserve currency status.
And so I won't be surprised if that gentleman's right at all. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. And so, now I want to bring you to the real simplified life version of everything that's happening, right? A good example here, okay? I think it's a good example. And so let's sit here and say that you live in a neighborhood and you bring home $50,000 a year, but your lifestyle is $100,000 a year. So what do you have to do? You have to use credit cards, and let's say you just go around your neighborhood to your buddies and stuff, and you borrow money, try to get you through the year to reach your $100,000 lifestyle. And they charge you, say, 5% interest on the stuff, the money they loan you. And so, but what happens throughout that year? All of a sudden, the next year rolls around, and inflation doubles, skyrockets, right? So things are more expensive. also because of what the government's doing, flooding the market with money and everything else, then that's been bringing the dollar down, right? And so now your dollar isn't as valuable. So that $50,000 you're bringing home really ain't worth $50,000 anymore, right? It doesn't go as far as it used to, and plus the money you were actually borrowing doesn't go as far as it used to either, right? Your purchasing power is devalued, and so, or decreased. And so what happens now, you're going to have to borrow probably around $80,000 versus the $50,000. So now you have to borrow even more to try to continue this $100,000 lifestyle, which has now got more expensive. And so just because of inflation, just because of the dollar going down and all that. And so eventually what happens after a couple of years, your neighbors, credit card company says, hey man, this ain't looking good. You know, I don't think we're going to let you borrow any money. No more money. And so what happens, because you maxed out your credit cards already, people around you are like, And so of course what's going to happen, you're going to end up defaulting on your debt. That's what's going to happen. You're going to file bankruptcy, right? And so it's about the simplest example I come up with on this to kind of compare. I mean, it's a lot more complicated with the government stuff. But the other big question is going to take money away from us is how are we going to pay for all these deficits? How are we going to pay for this $6 trillion budget, the deficits from 2015 on all the way up to 2020, especially last year? Taxes. And of course, the Biden White House is talking about a $3.5 trillion plan to tax the rich. And of course, they need to pay more taxes. I'm fine with that because even Warren Buffett and Bill Gates said that in public. Their percentage they pay is usually less than their secretaries, for God's sakes, because they have entire accounting firms working for them, and they don't get theirs through a paycheck. They get theirs through capital gains tax and stuff like that. And so, yes, I'm fine with that, but that's not going to cover everything. There's no way it's going to cover everything. And eventually, what happens? Come on now. I've been middle class long enough to understand this one. It always rolls downhill to us. It always rolls downhill to the middle class. I tell my wife, I get so frustrated with all these promises, and it never fails. We end up getting, some kind of little scraps off the heap of the plan, but usually we end up, fronting the bill, right? And it will end up rolling down to us, and we will end up paying more, whether it's in property taxes, so we don't even notice it, sales taxes, FICA, whatever it is, it's gonna roll to us. Mark my words, it's gonna roll downhill to the middle class as it always does. Okay, it may take a couple years, but it will get there because they're gonna have to, because it's either cut spending, raise taxes, or a combination of both, okay? And that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about taking your money away, and we're talking about inflation. Stuff's way more expensive already. We're gonna see what this inflation report brings out if it continues to go up. But you see what housing, cars, all that costs already, plus on top of the fact the dollar keeps devaluing, so it's worth less. So the money we bring home isn't even what it was worth 6 months ago, okay? And so, I put this out there because to me, knowledge is power. So I teach my son, knowledge is power, and information is how you actually plan for stuff, okay? And so, so I said, if I had a teenager, they'd be watching this video, they'd be going to school, talking to their friends about it, that kind of stuff. Because I just think it's important to know. Because this encompasses all markets. This affects all markets, okay? This affects the world, okay? And so, anyway, I hope you got something out of this. If you did, if you hadn't already, hit that like, subscribe button. I really appreciate it, guys. And I will end up seeing you tomorrow.